Welcome, everyone, to Bring a Friend podcast. Yes. And if you don't have a friend, you're not here. So you got to have a friend first to come here. And today, first, I'm Michael Mann, and to my side, Brookswood. And we're moving this show along. Hopefully, this show will continue to get momentum and speed. We have our special friend, Gil Bashe, and his sidekick friend, John, here.
This is going to be the shortest podcast in history.
No, we're all friends, equal friends. That's the wonderful thing about friends. They're all together, right, John?
That's the problem with Gil. Everybody is equal.
That's right.
Right? There's no hierarchy. There's no cognitive accomplishment. We're all kind of pushed into the middle where we take an intellectual average.
We all need each other, John.
So maybe we should rename this as the mediocre podcast.
Right. This is about bring a friend. What happens with friends, smart or smarter or handsome or less handsome.
Keep going. You're working it.
All of that is we complement each other. And we need each other. So I'm privileged that my smart friend John Nosta, my smart friend Michael Mann, and my smart friend Brookswood are all with me today. I don't have to really worry about the smart things because I'm surrounded by smart people. It's all about composite IQ, John.
Well, Gil, I'm definitely in the right room because I am not the smartest guy here. I'm just glad to be here with you all.
But don't worry. We're not using a bell curve, Brooks.
Sure.
We can we can all be there in the smart zone today.
Isn't it interesting that we know a lot of smart people. For everybody who has 120 or 130 IQ, there's a corresponding person in the universe who's got an 80 or a 70 IQ. That just flips me out if you want to talk about Gaussian distribution.
Well, the reality is with this is if we look at the societal ecosystem, it's not only about IQ. It's a combination of many things we need. And what I learned long ago is living in New York City from time to time, if someone doesn't pick up your waste in the streets after a few weeks, the greatest neighborhoods of New York City look like a mess. We need each other. And, certainly I think, John, you and I, from our upbringing, appreciate the fact that it really does, as Plato said, take a village. I know someone else said that too, but that person paraphrased that from Plato. So we'll stick with Plato, the originator of the phrase.
I think we should transform right out of Plato to Play-Doh.
Plato, I like Plato.
Where we can mold public perception to fit our nefarious
about
needs.
Health technology. Look,
So I didn't build Nosta Lab. Who did? Someone else did.
You did. You built.
I did. Right. There was no village.
Right. No village. But you know something? You didn't call up people to say, "Take a look at this. What do you think?" I mean, did you do it in a total vacuum?
Yeah, but that's not a village. Come on, Gil.
Oh, come on.
Michael? What are we going to do with this guy? I only have one or two friends in the world, and I'm really pleased that Gil Bashe is actually one of my friends because I wouldn't be able to survive.
Who's the second one, though? Who's the second one? That's
my dog, Ollie.
Your best friend.
Yeah.
I've been thinking I'm really struggling with a piece that I'm not struggling with. I write a trends piece for Medical Life, and John and I are both contributors to the platform Medical Life. And I'm writing a piece right now on every year. I write a piece on the top 10 health innovation trends. And, I've got most of them down, but one of the trends I'm struggling with, and John is really a world-class expert on this in the area of health innovation, is digital health. Digital health is such a big buzzword. It's almost jargon now. I almost feel like, digital health. If you want to get money, just say, something, I'm inventing a coffee machine that's all about digital health, and you're going to raise $100 million like this. But part of it is I'm struggling with this piece, and maybe Michael and Brooks and John, you can help me. There's a balance between the idea and its realization, and I find that we've got so many amazing ideas in the area of digital health, and yet when we really look at their realization or their pull through into the system, I don't know how you feel, John, but I feel like the gap between the inventive idea and the inventive realization, it's like tiny. It's like a thimble full of realization and an ocean of ideas. How do I express that as a trend?
Well, that's the I word, right? I mean, we talk about the I word, innovation, and most of the time it's really implementation.
Oh,
right.
I love that. Can I steal that one for the piece?
Go ahead, because actually, even if the idea is really good, if it can't diffuse into the system, the diffusion of innovation, the idea isn't adapted. We've talked about this a lot of times. The idea of the QWERT keyboard, the QWERTY keyboard, right? That was designed over 100 years ago. The rumor is to slow people down. I'm not sure if that's true or not. But in 1938, a guy named Dvorak invented a better keyboard. He innovated to this new ergonomically designed keyboard, and it failed miserably. So innovation doesn't always guarantee success. The reason it failed is, number one, no one wanted to buy a new typewriter. They were too expensive. That was a capital expense. And number two, everybody, including the four of us, are very comfortable with the QWERT finger positioning. So you're going to ask me to learn a new way of typing so that I can type 20% faster? It made no sense. And that is exactly the world we live in today. It is our ability to accommodate innovation into a system that's quite rigid, and that's medicine. Medicine is rigid.
Look, you said something. John and I were at the Global Wellness Summit together, and I was moderating this panel. John was one of the amazing panelists. We had three amazing panelists. He was one of the three. And John said something that has been quoted again and again, as he often says something that's quoted again and again. But it was about learning to unlearn. And that's really hard. I mean, part of it, we talk about culture, but I actually think it's about kind of like rote behavior patterns. We don't like when our offices upgrade the Word, the sort of like Microsoft Word, and it's upgraded to a new format and look. And for the first 3 weeks, everybody is complaining about the new interface. All of a sudden, after week 4, we get comfortable, we stop complaining. But new in replacing something that we've been using forever is terrible. There's one exception to the rule, though. I keep on my desk in my office that I actually am going into tomorrow in New York City, an Apple Newton and a Palm Pilot next to each other. It's my Apple Newton. I bought the moment Apple came out with the Newton. I could not wait. I bought this thing. It's about this big, and then I hooked it up to my phone line. I was getting my AOL email downloaded to this thing. It had my calendar. It had my to-do list. It had my contact list, and it was kind of a mammoth. I don't know how, it's like a piece of equipment, but it was amazing, and I had it.
Yeah.
And suddenly Palm Pilot came out with a Palm Pilot, and my ability to beam an address to John Nosta. We could exchange addresses.
Business cards, right? Virtual business cards.
Business cards. And suddenly the Newton went into the top drawer, which it for some time occupied with all my wearables, all my unused, I won't mention brand names, but sort of wearables that begin with an F, and never to be touched again, except now as a museum piece. And I think it's because we didn't have internet. We didn't have internet when the Apple came out. We had dial-up internet. We didn't have broadband internet. It didn't have enough utility. It was expensive. And then Palm Pilot comes out and just gives you what you want, your calendar and your contacts and the ability to share stuff. And I think part of it is sometimes we invent in a way that it's not only we have to relearn, to John Nosta's words, it's just more than we really want at a given time. And I think that slows down innovation too.
I think that you're right. There is certainly a human component.
I'm right.
Yeah,
Holy,
you're
this
right.
This is a historic moment, people. People, mark this down, listeners. John Nosta. I want to
revel in the moment.
Tweet this out.
So
John Nosta said Gil is right.
The quote is actually from Alvin Toffler, who wrote Future Shock, and he said that the illiterate of this century will not be those who can't read and write. The illiterate of this century will be those who can't unlearn and relearn. But you touch on something very interesting, and that is technological advances. I'll give you another quote that you can steal if you want, Gil.
I'll attribute it to you.
Okay.
You know I always do.
If it works today, it's already obsolete. And that innovation is such that it's already available. Transformation is here and at hand, but we don't adopt innovation in a linear path. Our ability to adopt and adapt innovation, particularly in a human construct, is extraordinarily limited by the psychopathology, by the availability, by how many bits and bytes we have. Do we have Wi-Fi, et cetera, et cetera? So there's a tremendous disconnect between the two, that innovation will lag. And I think the biggest impediment to innovation in today's world is this frail, miserable thing we call humanity. So I think there's a lot of very, very interesting things to kind of pick apart there.
Well, I'm going to touch on that because I think that so much of what we're doing is still, despite the whole concept of innovation, it's all really dependent on us as people. I mean, it's the rate limitation to innovation isn't innovation. I think we've got plenty of ideation and imagination and innovation. I think that the challenge is ultimately going to be humanity's inability to get out of humanity's way.
Yeah.
And, I know we may feel differently about this or not, but, I look at even dealing with issues of planetary health. The reality is we all know that the planet needs our support. The planet doesn't need us, right? The planet doesn't need humans. We're a virus to the planet. We need the planet. And yet we spend all our time doing what humans do. We argue, we have different points of view, we have different incentives. And I think medicine's like that to a large extent.
Sure.
There's certain things we've got to change. We know we've got to change. How many years have we been screaming about interoperability and health information access? I don't know. I had a full head of hair. It's not happening. It's just not going to happen. And I don't think it's because the big companies are dragging their heels on it. I don't want to mention any company that begins with an E or something like that. But I don't think it's that they don't want it to happen. I actually think that the systems are saying, wait a minute, if I share information, it's kind of pulling us together as one system.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want that.
Well, Gil, my example, the thing I talk about here a lot is that let's go back to our very, 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 very first technology. And I would argue that is fire.
Right.
And fire lives in this domain of wonder and fear. All of technology lives in this duality of wonder and fear. Fire changed humanity. It allowed us to stay up at night. It allowed us to move. It allowed us to cook our food and eat protein and grow our brain. Yet today, fire is still, if not one of the single biggest sources of personal and property damage. Your house, fire still burns down houses all the time. So fire is scary, yet it cooks our dinner. And then you kind of move down the road and you see this thing like an airplane or even a car or even a driverless car. These things have that same duality. The first time someone saw an airplane over 100 years ago, it was the scariest thing in the world, but it was also the coolest thing in the world. And I think technology is part and parcel of that dynamic. The driverless car today is like, you want me to get on the New Jersey Turnpike with that
driverless car?
I'm not doing that. That's crazy. But that is the fundamental duality. And where we live today is the bigger the innovation, the bigger the sense of wonder and fear. And that's artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is probably the most profound change to confront humanity ever.
I want to stay with that for a bit, because this concept of artificial intelligence, I almost feel that the name created an imaginary definition. Had they called it augmented intelligence or something similar, would physicians have said, yes, it's augmenting my intelligence. I think a lot of doctors who do repetitive tasks that are very involved in interpretation, it must be very threatening to them. I don't want to mention any specific specialty, but there are many specialties where you say, if you embraced it and employed it, you'd have more power, you'd have more voice, not less voice. But it's almost like they're going to get to a place, because they're not leading the way, that they will become an extinct profession in medicine. I feel in many cases because they didn't figure out how to make it theirs. And it's not just a question of looking at tumor boards, for instance. Will artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence aid in the discussion of experts who are doing a cancer tumor board? Will artificial intelligence aid in the interpretation of complex radiology exams, CAT scans, PET scans, SPECT scans, MRIs, X-rays, and so forth? I think the group of us here would say, absolutely it will. Absolutely it will find things that the human eye, that the human brain cannot. And I think back to when my amazing 97-year-old physician father-in-law finished top of his class at NYU Medical School. One of the reasons he finished first in his class was he was very skilled, but he has humongous memory capacity, humongous pattern recognition ability. So he was able to see and retain things that made him, transformed him into a great physician. Some of the greatest physicians we see of our time, it wasn't only because of their tactile skill. It was actually because of their informational pattern recognition skills. And you take that now and you imagine then, how many medicines did you have to remember when you graduated medical school in the 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s? How many medicines do you need to remember now in the 21st century? How many techniques? How many diagnoses? How many reimbursement codes? I don't see how a human being can really do that skillfully.
You got it. You hit the nail on the head, Gil. Humans are obsolete.
Mm-hmm. Not obsolete, augmented. Who's augmenting what? Who's augmenting?
Nonsense.
AI has the ability to be trained and untrained, to learn and unlearn.
Yeah.
Much faster and more efficient than a human.
Look,
that's,
I mean,
Brooks, that's a
the
really,
ability,
that's a John Nosta thing, right?
The ability for a physician to assimilate the flow of information today coming into their sphere of influence is impossible. It's impossible. And this, results in a mandating that artificial intelligence be part of our clinical path. Look, if I go to a doctor and I said, Doc, what are the new clinical trials? And he says, well, I haven't gotten to that yet. What the hell kind of an answer is that? That's tantamount to malpractice. So, I think that this is the problem. Okay. The doctor is no longer the smartest person in the room. And we know that doctors are arrogant, right?
Not all doctors.
Oh, come on. Let's go. No. Let's go to every pre-med. Okay. And let's do the psychopathology of the pre-med student, not the medical student, but those students who are pre-med. They're all very aggressive. They're all grade conscious, and they work really hard in a competitive way to get into medical school because it's a good ride. It's a good ride. It's a good job. It's a good career. Top 10 professions in the world today, in the United States, top 10 are all doctors, top 10 moneymakers. My point is this: physicians are no longer the smartest person in the room. They've got to see that. Technology and computers are, and that flips them out.
In that element, I do agree. I think, look.
So will we see the radiologists as the telephone operators? I mean, who's going to be the first one to go?
They'll be the technician. They'll be the technician fixing or augmenting the AI.
I think the technician who positions the camera and the patient in the tube and the thing, they're going to have a gig. Because it's not automated enough where the person comes in, puts the gown on, slides into the MRI tube, puts the little sort of like non-metallic earphones in, listens to their favorite radio station, and then says, "It's done. I'll slide out and get dressed and go home." Or the computer will print out your report. Look, Eric Topol wrote, "The patient will see you now." I think it's a little bit, the computer will tell you now. It's a little bit like, why do you need to wait for 3-4 days for your blood tests back when you're sweating it out? Yeah. But what I think, it's not a question of who will be the first to go. I'm going to flip it. I think I'm going to flip the question, Michael, to the positive, which is, who will be the first specialty to embrace augmented learning, artificial intelligence, machine learning, whatever you want to call it? Who will be the first specialty whose professional society says, count us in. We're aboard. We're going to develop courses in medical school for this specialty, so people deploy it. We're going to determine, I'm a nephrologist or I'm a general, and this is where general practitioners, general medicine, primary care can get back in the game, in my opinion, because we can tell through artificial intelligence. I've seen the data. We can tell who's diabetic and will need dialysis through machine learning. We know that. We don't use it, but we have the capacity to do that. We could say to that person, I'm assigning a clinical social worker to you to work with you to get to deal with your diet, to deal with this. So we have the capacity to do it. So I think, Michael, the question is, who's going to be not be the first to go? Who's going to be the first to jump on it, deploy it, own it, and elevate their specialty, where people say, whoa, this person, this specialty is providing so much more value in the game. There's no comparison. And John disagrees. I can tell. He agrees. Is this an agreement or a disagreement? No, you're not going to, you don't believe it's going to happen.
So
who's
John,
going to be,
go ahead,
so
John and Gil, what do you see as the early signs of any medical association? Is there any harbinger of this to come that is possibly going to be the forerunner in embracing AI in this?
I do have a prediction. I have a prediction, and maybe you're helping me, Michael, write my 2022 predictions article. That's what I'm really using this for. Thank you. I'll credit this one to you. But I don't think it's going to be medical specialties, believe it or not. I'm sad to say. I think that the first ones that will come aboard with artificial intelligence is probably going to be the decentralized clinical trials sector is going to use it. I think CROs are going to use it. I think the next wave of biotherapeutic companies that are looking to sort of accelerate and get toe-to-toe with the big pharmaceutical companies, I think they're going to figure out how to deploy it to move faster and get the right patients into their trials, submit a BLA or an NDA to FDA sooner, and to utilize their cash flow from investors much more wisely. I think they're going to set the path. And I think that medical specialties then are going to follow. And I think they're going to write into their protocols of NDAs and BLAs, we used artificial intelligence, so there. So, I mean, that's my gut prediction. It's not going to be doctors in clinical practice. It's going to be, John, I hate to use this word again, but I've got to. It's going to be the innovators of the next wave of breakthrough therapies who just don't feel the patient has time. And I will give a classic example. People with glioblastoma, pancreatic cancer, lung cancer, really serious life-threatening diseases that have shortened lifespan, where we don't have good interventional therapies for. I think those companies that come into the space are going to jump into that area. John, I mean, what's your thought?
I think that the way we're thinking about this entire perspective is backwards, just fundamentally backwards. We're trying to take...
You can see why we're friends. We're kind of bookend friends.
Well, look, I think that we're trying to take a medical system that largely people would agree is broken. I think that's one of the head nodding things is the practice of medicine, whether it be financially driven or whatever, is broken. So what we're trying to do is to inject into a broken system AI. Right? That's just completely
wrong.
You.
I
would rather inject medicine into AI. I would rather say this is the template for genius, for brilliance, and then rebuild medicine around what really is the dominant cognitive and functional process. Now, that's pretty freaky, right? Am I saying tear down the hospitals and get rid of specialties? Maybe I am. Maybe we get rid of all clinical specialties and have AI be the primary care physician. AI, primary care physician.
That I'm not disagreeing. I wouldn't disagree with you, by the way. I actually do think, look, many of the illnesses that result in morbidity, mortality are from non-communicable diseases: heart disease, cancer, diabetes, respiratory disease, mental illness. Those illnesses, non-communicable illnesses, kill about 70% of the world's population. And then there are the infectious disease elements like COVID and other aspects that we're dealing with right now. But the majority, if we look at heart disease or cancer or diabetes, cancer aside, but heart disease, diabetes, respiratory disease, I think we could agree we've got pretty good inexpensive generic therapies to address many of those basic non-communicable disease conditions. So why are we not engaging? And I think it's because it's not just the system of medicine that's broken. It's the system of paying for health and what we expect from health. And my firm belief is that all these companies that are major employers that have 1,000 employees or more, they don't realize they're in the health business. They're spending a fortune per family on health benefits. You're a major, John, you're leading a major corporation, Nosta Labs, featuring obviously the brain of John Nosta. And you've talked to me before about how much you pay for your family's health insurance as a family unit. So try to imagine a company paying for that for thousands of employees. And what choice do they have? It's a benefit. You've got to provide some element of the benefit. And like anything that's given to you for free, people sometimes abuse it. The system will take care of me. I'll have another piece of cheesecake. Who cares if I keep on getting heavier when I really should be eating a carrot instead of a cookie? All these things actually are leading toward the path to sick care. And that's what you and I talked about in Boston a few weeks ago. How do we transform from the sick care system to a self-care healthcare system? We're far away from it. So I wish it were artificial intelligence was our solution, but maybe primary care doctors need to have artificial intelligence with them to say to their patients, hey, let me show you where you're headed. This is you today. And now, using this model, I'm going to show you in 10 years from now. You're here.
Okay.
Not bad. 10 years from now, you're a living train wreck. What do we want to do about this? And companies need to actually get into the health game, not just the providing a health benefit game. They need to actually understand ultimately they are going to foot the bill somehow or another. The price is going to go up, up, up. And the absenteeism due to illness is going to go up, up, up. And there's no solution other than, I think, to shift their mindset to say, we need to actually embed in our community programs that get people to embrace health.
Or just hire robots.
Well, not hire robots. Well, that's certainly manufacturing companies are just saying, hey, humans have a benefit, but guess what? The automotive manufacturing line of supply chain is what?
Broken?
Not so much broken, but it's robots. I mean, go to a major car manufacturing plant. You don't see thousands of people with wrenches. You see robots. I've been in drug distribution centers, by the way, major drug distribution centers where medicines are collected and shipped off to pharmacies. You know who's doing all the collection? Not humans, robots. The boxes pass and robotic arms take the medicines off these humongous high shelves and put them into boxes for shipping. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing what goes on.
Do you see enterprises and businesses being the first to really adopt these things because they can be a little more nimble and they need help? I mean, I just saw a video sales tool that you can attach to your Zoom meeting, and this AI will watch and give you coaching and feedback in real time. Your customer can't see it, but it's all popping up to you in real time. Hey, here, it's analyzing expressions of your customers, doing all these things, and giving the salesperson the ability to. It's almost like I wonder if, like in healthcare, if payers end up being the ones to embrace AI faster, and they probably already are. If you look at how insurance algorithms have worked forever, if we'd be foolish to think they haven't already started using machine learning to soup those things up. In 2012, I listened to a panel, Future of Healthcare, and at the time, the CTO of Kaiser Permanente was there, and the CTO of 23andMe was there, and they were having this conversation about leveraging DNA analysis to provide future care and essentially charge now for what you're going to impact the health system later. And that kind of scared me a little bit because it's like, not everybody, but a lot of people have given their data to like a 23andMe. And if an insurance company could buy that data and then potentially use that against you later with some AI that's going to predict, hey, you're going to have need for dialysis, right? That's going to impact the system, and then we look at things like you mentioned diabetes. And I think that's a very timely one because we haven't even been able to solve the basic thing, which is giving inexpensive insulin to the people that need it. It's very expensive. I don't know why. I think the resonating thing might be that it's probably for no reason. Maybe that there's some corporate greed there going on, but I don't know. I'm not close enough to know necessarily, but I wonder, does AI impact those things? And is it called artificial for two reasons? One, because humans are afraid of it. So it's kind of an ego thing. We call it artificial because we don't want it to be smarter than us. And then two, does it then become weaponized against the consumer to really extract the value that these corporations are looking for? That's why my first question started with, do you see corporations? So I'll stop there.
Well, I think that the last thing you said, Brooks, is weaponized against the consumer. I think that's a real concern, right? And if you've had a medical condition and you try to get life insurance or long-term care insurance, it's a bear. I had a situation. I went to see a doctor. Instead of writing 1, he wrote 110, or it was transcribed by his assistant as 110 instances. And I was rejected for long-term care insurance initially. And, I basically had to go back to the doctor who kind of didn't remember, and he didn't want to change his notes because his notes are part of a legal like control. I said, hey, if I had 110 of these, I'd be dead. I mean, it's common sense. He said, well, that's a good point. So he rewrote his report with all sorts of caveats. I did get long-term care insurance, but I had to battle for it. But that's the inaccuracy and the retribution of a system that doesn't work for the consumer. And I think, quite bluntly, to your point, I think consumers should be frightened of the system at times. I don't think the system has the consumer's best interests at heart. And I would love to believe that payers will use artificial intelligence to engage people proactively and in a pro-health way. I'm not totally confident that that's how they will use this for in a system that doesn't demand that people have access to some form of health insurance. I just want to say as a caveat, with all due respect to my payer friends and my industry benefits friends and my provider friends, we're really the only major developed nation in the world, I think John Nosta will know otherwise, that doesn't provide its citizens with health care. It's an employee for the most part. For 52% of our population buys receives their insurance by way of their employer. And then we have a large segment of our society that are shopkeepers, independent store owners. They buy health care for themselves and others through other means. It could be through affordable care or other plans. And then you have some that are on, of course, government programs, Medicare with supplemental, or Medicaid for different reasons. But for the most part, you've got to argue your way into a healthcare plan. I mean, think about it. You've got to argue your way into a healthcare plan if you're not employed by a major corporation.
Not Medicare HMOs are a mess trying to figure those out. If you're over 65 and need to pick your plan, I mean, there's too many to pick from.
It is a mess. It is a mess. How do you do that? Most people do the default to like AARP United as a result of that. AARP is a major brand. They have group insurance. It seems easy. I'll do that. But I see a lot of seniors who suddenly realize they're on a plan and they have a supplemental plan, but doesn't cover really the medications that they take. And that's a problem. That's a real problem because we're dealing now with a whole generation. We started with innovation and digital health. Our system is moving to a place where we're dealing with senior illiteracy when it comes to digital health. That scares me. More and more we're going to rely on our smartphones to keep us alive. And we have people who are 70 plus that don't have the dexterity or the knowledge to do that. And they're the people who need healthcare the most. John will be forever young, so I'm not worried about John. I'm worried about
That's
me.
true.
Yeah. I mean, John is going to look like he's like 35 when he's like 95.
Forever. Right. Well, I follow the rules of exponential innovation while you guys wallow in an old system that's broken. So
That's right.
yeah.
I'm going to find my walker in a moment and power up my Newton.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I think John is spot on. It's not that only that the system is broken. It's like a giant maze, and depending on your adventurous spirit, your resilience, your knowledge, your network, your connections, your survival is based upon your ability to navigate the system successfully. And I think a lot of people don't make it, not because we don't have good medicine or good medical practitioners or good therapies. I just think, and I see this all the time, I think it's down to two things. And you're all welcome to say, nah, Gil, you're wrong. I think it's down to fear. Like fear, I don't want to know. I just don't want to know anymore. So individuals fear, and that's one.
Mhm.
And I think it's also, if you don't have a roadmap into this system of health, you're lost. And if you're lost, yeah, guess what? You're on a desert island, absent of health.
John, do you think the consumerization of healthcare, meaning we start marketing more than just prescription drugs? I mean, obviously that's been marketed to us forever, but healthcare things and products, if they were marketed to us in a way that other products are marketed to us, would that help the consumer to relearn, right? Because a lot of decisions are made from a group perspective, and a lot of the group is affected by whether it's through media or marketing, right? To really adjust those things. I wonder, like, we have this huge aging market, right? This longevity market that's just going to continue to get larger every year, every month that goes by. There's not enough beds for the people that are aging out, right? Do you think that marketing is what's going to really push that forward?
Yes and no. I think that when we talk about consumer empowerment, right, me taking more control of my health and wellness, I think that there are many stakeholders there now that it very well may be my local supermarket that has a voice in wellness, and that my local pharmacist has a voice. So it's not just a linear shift from the doctor to the patient. I think that's a mistake. I think it's a shift to a comprehensive autonomy driven by technology. So absolutely, I think that we're going to see people become, look at taking your blood pressure. Go back 30, 40 years. It was a big deal to take your blood pressure. Look at glucose monitoring. I mean, to me, the management of diabetes with continuous blood glucose monitoring now is extraordinary and is a game changer. Who is driving that change? The consumer, by tracking their glucose. And interestingly, what we're seeing now is that data, those continuous blood glucose monitoring, the thing that you kind of pop on your arm and it just continuously monitors blood glucose. Those data are now being analyzed so that we can optimize your insulin delivery. And that's really interesting. That's, it used to be the domain of the endocrinologist to come in and kind of tweak your insulin. The reality is that tweaking wasn't that good. So I think that, yes, we can shift it to the consumer, but I think you have to shift it to the sphere of the consumer. Where do I spend most of my time? And, maybe the best place to check my weight is on the Ferris wheel at the park, and not in some constrained environment.
John, I want to get into something that I agree with you, but I don't think you went far enough. And because when you put the blood glucose sort of patch there, so you remember this, even though you were 3 at the time, that the diabetes complication and control trial, DCCT trial of National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, and NIDDK demonstrated that people, they said patients then, but people with diabetes who controlled their diabetes very carefully had a 10-year extended lifespan with quality of life. That's what the data showed. The data showed that those patients who were diligent in checking their blood glucose, of monitoring their insulin, of using the products correctly, of dieting correctly, they live longer and better. The response of the people with diabetes who looked at these data that were conclusive was, I would rather die 10 years earlier than change my lifestyle. Conflict of hard data that shows something. What you did, though, and I just want to point to our listeners, is you talked about another element of the consumer. I think that consumerism is about making it easier, is lowering the obstacle or the bar to actually engaging as a person. So if you take a look at diabetes blood glucose metering, it went from these big boxes you had at home to these little things to actually wearables that spoke to your insulin pump. So you could check your blood glucose. It spoke to your insulin pump. It was on your phone. You and your doctor could discuss sort of adjusting your insulin therapy time to that. It's almost today effortless.
Right.
And that effortlessness, when you combine effortlessness and consumer and confidence, you get change. So look, Amazon, COVID is a catalyst. Amazon certainly was doing a fine job delivering stuff to us with Amazon Prime pre-COVID. During COVID, Amazon's business exploded. It demonstrated to everyone its proof of concept. And now if you want Tylenol, Pepcid, Advil, Aleve delivered to your home, and you're too lazy to go down to the pharmacist, which is walking distance from your house, hey, Amazon Prime will have it at your house tomorrow. That's good enough. And that ease of access is really what I think is delaying some of these consumer health advances. It's hard. You have so many steps. You got to get a payer to approve it. You got to get a doctor to write it. You got to go. You got to sit in a waiting room. Telehealth is being contested now. All of these obstacles to the consumer taking charge are actually putting our health system back to the Stone Age.
Don't you think also it's trust as well? There's a trust, like kind of with Facebook as a barrier as well that the consumer has.
Trust I think is built through tell me what you want to tell me, prove to me you're going to do it, and do it again. And I think that's how Amazon won out. I mean, I don't think of Amazon and trust, although you're right, Michael. I agree with you. What made me trust Amazon was I ordered, they delivered. They said they were going to deliver. If they changed the timing on the delivery, they sent me a text message. When people were ripping off Amazon packages from your doorstep, they started to say the package is delivered, text with a picture at your doorstep. They kept on, to your point, trying to secure your confidence in the service. And I don't think that doctors, you wait in a waiting room, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, then you wait in another room, right, by yourself. A technician comes in, takes your blood pressure, takes your temperature, and then leaves. And then you wait another 10 minutes, and then a doctor comes in with a computer or a tablet, and then sort of like pokes around, asks you some questions, and 9 minutes later, out they go. It's not a satisfying experience for a consumer. It's not a consumer comforting experience. And I think, by the way, that's one of the reasons why the historic family physician model in this country is kind of suffering.
And then you put your trust in the human construct, the mind and the clinical capabilities of the physician, which is glaringly deficient in today's world. But that's the doctor. The doctor must be right. The doctor is the smartest person in the room. And I think those things are changing very, very quickly.
I'm with you, John, 100%. I don't know how many times, look, you and I are fairly up on our data and the newest medical information. I don't know how many times doctors have said to me, what do you think? To me, knowing who I am, knowing who you are, they've often asked me. I've had doctors say, hey, I've just been had a rep speak to me about a new medication. What do you think about it? And obviously, I'm not a doctor. I'm very connected to the medical community. I'm immersed in the medical community, as is John, as are you, Michael, as are you, Brooks. I think that doctors can be vulnerable also. But I think, to John's point, doctors who are sort of see themselves as the smartest person in the room, they lose one critical factor. They lose the I don't know factor. And when you lose the I don't know factor, you've got to make an assumption that can often be wrong. And that's, Brooks, to your point, artificial intelligence, to say, I'm going to plug stuff in and look at the wealth of data. I'm going to take my mind as a physician and join it with another 2,000 physician case studies and see what we come up with for this patient. That involves not a medical knowledge. That involves, I think, a psychological sense of well-being as a physician, that I'm a conduit to care, but I am not the god of care.
Well, what did the doctor say is the proverbial expression that people say, right? When my wife comes home from the pediatrician, the first thing I say is, well, what did the doctor say? Regarding an issue or concern. But that's wrong, right? I would rather say, what did the computer say? Now, I'm not finished, because it's not a period at the end of that sentence. There's a comma at the end of the sentence, because what it is what did the computer say, comma, and what did the doctor do? Empowering the physician to treat, to act at this stage in the evolution of medicine is where we are. So I think that's very, very important that we look at the duality of those things, and they're not necessarily exclusive. I think that we define medicine by the hegemony of the system, by the power of the payer, by the arrogance of the almost military-like system, chief of medicine. We have these terms: clinical trial. Who wants to go on trial? I don't want to go on trial. I'm innocent. Yeah, that's what we do. We're going to put you in a clinical trial, And then worse than that is, how do I find my patients? I'm going to recruit my patient. Oh my goodness, I don't want to be recruited, right? Is this a draft? So I think there's so many, just look, the lexicon of the exam. We know now that a physician will have a discussion with the patient that will have 300 to 1,500 words in it. We can do linguistic analysis to listen to those words and find really interesting things, like likelihood of depression, like the number of times you use pain with regard to your arthritic hip. And then, of course, you vary that over time. Each one is evolved. You can actually detect Parkinson's disease from voice now.
That's correct. Right. Vocal technologies.
School, right?
Absolutely.
You can detect coronary artery disease from voice. I don't believe it, but the data is actually published. Why are we not using these interfaces to enhance that part of the history and physical of the physical exam?
I think, John, that when we look at human nature, one, the payer is going to say it's investigational, denied. So what happens is, for the physician who's on board with the innovation, they're not being reimbursed for their time to use the innovation. That's one problem.
Right.
The other problem is, you take a doctor, and when you think about basic medicine, you've written about this. One of the greatest inventions in medicine was the stethoscope. And what did they do with the stethoscope? They listened, right? Suddenly, you're using your ability to hear as a diagnostic tool. Well, what's voice therapy or voice technologies? It's your ability to actually listen to the patient's voice and make a clinical assessment. But for some reason, we hold up our hands in disbelief that that's true. But the stethoscope is okay, right? That's okay. But the voice, which is an indicator of potentially Parkinson's or COVID or Alzheimer's or ALS, no, we're not going to do that.
Well, Gil, the stethoscope, the role of the stethoscope is to identify the doctor. Right. That's what the stethoscope is. I wear it. I wear it reverently over my shoulders like a prayer shawl.
With my bow tie in between.
That's what it is. Because let me tell you something. I mean, having studied this a little bit, those of you who know the intricacies of auscultation, of listening to the heart, things like a systolic ejection click or a 1/6 systolic ejection murmur, you know what those things are? They're rumors. They're rumors. They're not diagnostic information. Somehow the cardiologist hears something. It appears magically in the chart. Okay, not validated. It's just a rumor. I think I heard it. Then all of a sudden, the intern hears a 1/6 systolic ejection murmur. The resident does, and all of a sudden, it takes a life of its own. So I think the stethoscope is ridiculously antiquated. I mean, this is a stethoscope, right? This is a stethoscope that takes that heart sound, right, and syncs it with my phone. So now I have a visual recording. Visual. I could see the lub-dub. And the interesting thing, and I'll come full circle on this, is that this is no longer the domain of the cardiologist, the fancy stethoscope. This ends up with a patient who is sitting on his couch, who now can listen to heart sounds, synchronize the EKG to that, and actually measure cardiac contractility. So we see the stethoscope now is moving into that, and Michael, what you said, into that consumer domain, but it's sort of integrated care with the clinician and with technology. So yeah, there are a lot of sacred cows in medicine, and I think that's going to change.
And that's why I brought my smart friend to the table today, right? I thought that bring a friend always needs. We have to change the title of the program. Bring a really smart friend. I also want to congratulate John, by the way. John, I found out this morning, was named one of the top 15 global digital health influencers. And I'm not surprised.
That's because Gil is on that list too. Now I think we should end influencer lists.
Yeah, we should.
We should, because they're nonsense.
Say, I'm going to write to those people and tell them that you're.
I would like to. I'm really very seriously saying, don't ever call me an influencer.
Michael wrote to me earlier this morning because he knew we were going to be in conversation. He said, "Do you think, because John is so famous at this point, he would come off the list and let me come on the list?"
Sure, I'm more than These are. Don't get me going on influencer lists.
Oh,
look, part of it is. What is influence? I'm not really sure, to be honest with you.
It's showbiz.
I don't know how these lists are developed. I have no idea.
Gil, it's showbiz. I'm going to write one today. I'm going to do top 10 thinkers in the innovation space. Can
I be on the list?
Sure, why not? It doesn't matter anyway.
How about Michael and Brooks? Can they be on the list?
I was thinking the whole show of a book I'd like to read. It's called The Tao of John, and it's a really cool coffee table book. And it has some really amazing quotes. I think that would be cool.
But with John Nosta quotes, like
exactly. All these great expressions
of Ollie, his dog, and occasionally throwing one of his kids into the background.
Most of them are stolen. I mean, you know what? I think it was Picasso who said, "Good artists borrow and great artists steal," something like that. So,
well, you should see Michael's art. This started this is Jackson Pollock, but Michael has some amazing work. And he said, "Who do you think painted this?" And I said, it has texture of Picasso in the background. And I was trying to put my finger on who did the artwork. And he said, in the end, to give Michael the credit he deserves, he said, "I'm the artist of this piece." There
you go. Wonderful.
So I'm hopeful that Michael will invite the three of us to bring a friend in the future. And we'll talk about Michael and art. And John, I know that you're good friends with C. Michael Gibson, who's a great cardiologist and an artist. And the two of you have discussed art and medicine.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I'd be curious for another conversation at another time, how art expands his perspective of patient care.
I think that just to riff on that one quick point, in business, we use the word innovation because it sounds good. If I, as a CEO of a company, wanted to use the other word, and I'm not going to say it yet, but I'm going to tell my employees and my staff and my sales and everybody, I want you to be more, not innovative, but creative. I want you to be more creative. The whole system would fall apart because it sounds like you're going to cheat or you're going to do something inappropriate. But really, creativity is the domain of the data scientist today. Creativity is the domain of the clinician. And I don't think we appreciate that enough, that creativity, to be able to think differently, to think outside of the box, is extraordinary. And if there is something that's going to separate humanity from AI, it may be the domain of creativity, at least a human perspective on creativity. That's a big, big, big issue and something very interesting to think about.
I think you're spot on. I think that that's the real final word of this bring a friend moment. And I hope everybody who's listening takes that away. John, thank you for letting me bring you to
my pleasure, my brother.
Show and Tell today. Thank you.
It's always fun, Gil.
Thank you. This has been awesome.